In the world of sports, debates are commonplace. TV sports channels such as ESPN and Fox Sports have even drawn to the attention that can stem from debate, having their own shows where sports personalities debate various sports topics. Some of these debates can get fierce, resulting in grown adults acting very normal about multi-millionaires who have no idea who they are.
Take me out, it's my turn! You told me it was my turn! You can talk.
No debates in sports, however, are as fierce as the GOAT debate. GOAT, or greatest of all time, for short, discussions, are discussions that only a select few athletes ever get the honor of even being mentioned in unironically. GOAT debates can often even extend past sports fans and become mainstream debates, some examples being LeBron James and Michael Jordan, Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi, Tom Brady and inflation. But there's one GOAT debate in sports that doesn't get the recognition it deserves in my opinion, and it's a question I've never seen anyone try to seriously answer. Who is the GOAT of Wii Sports? Yes, Wii Sports. This game in and of itself has its own legacy, as the defining game of the Wii craze that overtook the world when it launched in November 2006, being the best-selling Nintendo game of all time as of the making of this video, selling 82 million copies. The success of Wii Sports also led to a sequel, Wii Sports Resort, being released in 2009, once again being used as a tech demo of sorts, this time for the Wii Motion Plus accessory. This legacy extends to many of the CPU Miis that you face in some of the sports in these games, as certain Miis have garnered their own reputation that's been recognized in mainstream meme culture, whether it be due to their fearsome abilities in a select sport, whether they make a YouTuber want to pull out all of their hair.
Freaking Taco Fall is this guy's name, I think. And her name, Blocky McBlock!
Or some combination of the two. Whatever the case, these CPU Miis are the topic of this video. As you may know, for every sport in Wii Sports and Resort, your Mii has a set skill level that measures your, well, skill in a given sport. In the sports where you can go against the CPU Miis, this skill level is used to determine which CPU Miis the game will pit you against. It's because of this that we can calculate how good any given CPU Mii is at any given sport. And thanks to MiiWiki, most sports have tables that allow us to more easily refer to this information. It's not a perfect resource, as Baseball and OG doesn't have the ranking table in the main article for baseball, forcing me to run checks through every CPU Mii's article to get the rankings I need for that, along with ranking information in CPU Mii's articles sometimes contradicting what's shown in the table, but I'm not going to be too hard on them. It's honestly really nice that this info exists at all, and MiiWiki is a part of the Nintendo Independent Wiki Alliance, so I feel fairly safe trusting this source. And shoutouts to MiiWiki and anyone who's helped contribute to it for helping a lot with the process of getting the statistics for this video. But now with that tangent over, with all the data collected, I now just have to run through some fairly simple calculations to determine how good a CPU Mii is, on average, at your average sport. Much easier said than done, as there are 100 CPU Miis in Wii era Wii Sports, and up to 7 sports to account for when running through this data. But after a painful 7 to 8 hours of data collection and math that I quickly realized could have been done in a much more efficient manner, I have everything I needed to officially crown the GOAT of Wii Sports. So without further delay, let's take a look at some of the most interesting things the data shows us, because I'm sure some of it will come as a surprise to you, and answer the question, who is the GOAT of Wii Sports? Though we're looking for who the greatest Wii athlete is, there are two sides to every coin. In order for someone to be the best, there needs to be someone else who's the worst. So, who is the worst? Well, statistics show that the worst Mii athlete of all time is Megan. Debuting in Wii Sports Resort, one could argue that Megan's resume has the potential to be better had she gotten a chance to prove herself in those sports. That being said, I think her stats as is are damning enough of an indictment on her terrible Wii athletic ability. When you get 4 chances to prove yourself as an athlete, and your best score has you ranked 87th out of 100 competitors, I think it's fair that this sort of narrative exists around you. On average, Megan only outperforms 7.108% of other CPU Miis at a given sport, over 10 percentage points behind the next worst Mii. Moving all the way up to number 98, we find the weakest CPU Mii who debuted in OG, that being Fumiko, with an average percentile of 20.225. Only being 2 spots higher, there is obviously not much different here than with Megan. Fumiko is pretty bad at any sport she participates in, though her rankings aren't quite as bad as Megan's, and she actually falls just short of the average line in table tennis, being ranked 51st out of 100 in that sport. helping give her a boost over the two Miis below her. Moving one spot higher to number 97, we have Chris, the lowest ranked CPU Mii to participate in every sport eligible for this ranking, with an average percentile of 25.489. To his credit, Chris is the first CPU Mii we're talking about to have a top half ranking in a sport, being ranked number 41 in table tennis, and he's not too far from having another one in basketball, being ranked number 54 there. However, he ranks pretty badly in every other sport, and there's a chance you've gone your entire life without facing him in tennis, as he actually has the humiliating honor of being one of the Miis ranked below tennis's designated starter opponents in Matt and Miu. You know how Matt's a two-time champion? Well, someone had to be the yang to that yin, I guess, because in number 94, we have Ryan, who is ranked last in both of the sports Matt's a champion in. These two dead last rankings drag his average percentile all the way down to 28.824. It's kinda a shame, because the rest of Ryan's rankings aren't terrible. Not amazing. He generally ranks below average even without the two dead last rankings, but he'd still probably be a good bit higher without the 2 zeros in his data. I give him respect for trying at least. I'm going to talk about these next two together, because not only are they neighboring each other in the overall rankings, but it seems as though they got there in pretty similar ways. At numbers 90 and 89, we have Miu and Nick, with average percentiles of 35.055 and 35.349 respectively. At first, them being this low came as a big shock to me, as they're both ranked numbers 3 and 2 in baseball. But when you look at the rest of the data, it starts to become a bit more understandable. Outside of baseball, Miu and Nick only have one other top half ranking, with Nick in particular being dragged down by having 2 sports and resort where he ranks bottom 6 in the entire field. As mentioned earlier, Miu is one of the starting opponents for tennis, where she ranks number 54, and is dragged down further by her pitiful ranking of number 98 out of 100 in swordplay. Moving up to number 80, we have an interesting case here. The Mii in question is Vincenzo, with an average percentile of 40.067. I don't mean that he's interesting in terms of his rankings. He does have an impressive ranking of 25th in table tennis under his belt, combined with 2 other terrible rankings. But no, what makes him interesting is that he's the only CPU Mii from the OG Wii Sports Duology cast that participates in under half of all sports that use CPU Miis. He debuted in Resort, so he has no stats from OG under his belt, but he also goes into the role of commentator and coach in cycling. So his only sports are swordplay, basketball, and table tennis. This fact, along with the established fact that there is a sport Vincenzo can do well in, shows that there's maybe some potential there, and with him being a commentator plus coach for cycling, suggests that he has enough understanding of the sport to at least be pretty good at it, but unfortunately, we can only rank him based on what we see him do in the games, so he stays down here as a result. Now that we've escaped the bottom of the list, I want to go out of order for a bit and focus on some of the Miis from OG who experienced massive changes in their ability from that game going into Resort, because I wanted to give respect to some of the Miis who placed really badly in OG, but massively stepped it up in Resort. However, in order for there to be risers, there have to be some fallers that take their place, so I'll also have to talk about the people who fell off from OG to Resort. But let's start off positive by talking about some of Wii Sports' late bloomers. First off, let's talk about Akira. In the overall rankings, Akira places in number 53 with an average percentile of 49.583, which doesn't sound super impressive, but I think if we recontextualize how he got there, we'll see how it could have been much worse. Out of the 60 Miis from OG, Akira ranked down at 55th, with an average percentile of only 19.95. His best ranking was tennis, and even then, he only ranked 37th in that sport. Akira then ranks in the bottom 6 in both other sports he participates in, being 33rd out of 39 in boxing, and baseball being his worst overall sport, ranking 57th. However, he managed to, for the most part, do a complete 180 in Resort. Though he does still have one pretty bad ranking, that being 81st out of 98 in cycling, he more than cancels out with a number 22 ranking in basketball, and then 2 top 10 rankings in swordplay and table tennis, being ranked numbers 8 and 3 in those sports respectively. These stats average out to give him an average percentile of 71.808 in Resort, placing him 7th out of the 100 Mii cast. The next Mii who showed massive improvement I wanted to talk about was Abby. Overall, Abby ranks number 32 with an average percentile of 55.612, but it's very tough to believe that given her stats in OG. Accounting for only the 2 sports she participates in OG, Abby ranks dead last, with a percentile of just 8.475, as she ranks bottom 10 in both sports she participates in, ranking number 56 in tennis and number 54 in baseball. Her stats in OG are comparable to that of Megan's in Resort, who, as I previously mentioned, is the worst Mii athlete of all time. This serves to make her turnaround in Resort that much more shocking, as her average percentile in Resort jumps all the way up to 79.18, good for 4th overall in the cast. Though she has no top 10 rankings in Resort, she has a debatably even more impressive accolade, being the only Mii in that game to have pro stats in all 4 sports, highlighted by her ranking of 13th in basketball. But in my opinion, the most impressive glow up of a Mii from vanilla sports to Resort is James. Rather than the 2 mentioned before him, James' stats in the original Wii Sports weren't anywhere near as bad. Don't get me wrong, not good, as he ranked 44th with an average percentile of 35.133, ranking in the bottom half of all 3 sports, with his worst ranking being in baseball, ranked number 44. So if he didn't have as low of lows as the previous 2, what makes his rise in Resort more impressive to me? Well, James was not just elite in Resort, he was dominant. James ranks number 1 overall in average percentages in Resort, and it isn't even close. He has an average percentile of 90.91 in Resort, over 11 points ahead of number 2. His weakest ranking in Resort is being number 21 in table tennis. His other 2 rankings are both top 5 in the game, those being number 5 in swordplay and number 4 in basketball. It's very possible that the only reason he doesn't share Abby's accolade of all sports pro status is because he doesn't even participate in cycling, instead serving as the referee, which, like Vincenzo, implies solid fundamental knowledge of the sport, leaving the only question to be if he could execute if he got the chance to participate in the sport himself. But now that we talked about the risers, let's get into the fall-offs. Beginning this list, we have Steph. In OG, Steph wasn't an elite athlete, but she was solid, placing 17th overall in the cast with an average percentile of 65.255. However, this was out of only 2 sports, those being tennis, where she ranks number 16, and baseball, where she ranks number 27. However, her stats in Resort are a far cry from that. Steph ranks 74th in Resort with an average percentile of 40.635. Steph devolves into a one-trick pony in this game, as though Resort contains her best overall sport, as she ranks number 5 in cycling. She ranks in the bottom half of every other sport, with the notable downsides being her rankings of number 95 in table tennis and number 80 in basketball. Combine that with a below average ranking in swordplay and her 4-sport sample size in Resort, as compared to true sports in OG, drag her down to an overall ranking of number 57 with an average percentile of 48.842. A very disappointing follow-up to a promising beginning. Next up, let's talk about Tatsuaki. Overall, Tatsuaki ranks number 42 with an average percentile of 52.139. Not bad, but nowhere near his glory days in OG, where he ranked 13th overall with a score of 68.037. He participated in all 3 sports, and though his rankings in baseball and boxing were only slightly above average, his number 3 ranking in tennis helped to propel him up the rankings, along with showing that he could at least perform solely outside of his prime sports. However, that same ability didn't translate to Resort. He failed to reach the same heights as in OG, as his best sport in Resort is cycling, where he still only ranks number 37, and he falls below average in the other 3 sports, with his worst being table tennis, where he's ranked number 80. Overall, Tatsuaki ranks number 76 in Resort, with an average percentile of 40.215. Lastly, the biggest fall from grace for me from the original to Resort is Maria. Now, in fairness to Maria, she was never going to live up to her dominance in OG, as she ranked tops in that game with an average percentile of 94.07. Though she did only participate in 2 sports to get that number, she ranked top 5 in both of them, being number 4 in tennis and number 5 in baseball. With all that being said, it's still disappointing to see her slip to below average in Resort. Like Tatsuaki, she failed to reach the same heights as an OG, with her best sports being rankings of number 33 and 40 in swordplay and basketball respectively. She ranks a mediocre number 56 in table tennis, but what really drags her down is her number 92 ranking in cycling. Overall, Maria ranks number 61 in Resort with an average score of 44.73. What I think really makes Maria's case the worst of these 3 is that had her stats in Resort been just above average, about somewhere in the range of a percentile in the high 50s to high 60s, she may have had a spot in the all-time GOAT discussion, if not at least be a lot higher on that list. But her lackluster Resort performance and its impact, having doubled the sample size as OG, dropped her to number 20 all-time, with an average percentile of 61.177. Still very good numbers, but could have been even better. So we've talked about a few Miis already, some being good, but most of them being pretty bad. As I was gathering the data, one Mii's overall statistics stuck out to me, but not for being either good or bad. No, this was the most mid Mii athlete out of the entire cast. So, who exactly is it? Well, the champion of mid in the Wii Sports lore is Ren. Overall, Ren ranks number 52 with an average percentile of 50.04. As expected, he doesn't have many rankings that stand out at first glance, though he is one of the worst in tennis, being ranked number 57, below starter opponents Matt and Miu. His best ranking overall is being number 18 in table tennis. From there, he has no other rankings that put him in the top or bottom quarter of the rankings in any respective sport, but it does trend very slightly positive, helping to get him to this middle point for his score. This also sort of translates to his overall rankings based on game, as he avoids the very top or bottom in both games, though he's a bit further from the middle in those rankings than his title would have you think. Ren ranks number 41 in OG, with a percentile of 36.677, and number 28 in Resort, with a percentile of 60.063. But now, I'm sure you want me to talk about Miis that are actually, good. You clicked on this video to learn who the GOAT of Wii Sports was, not to hear about people like Megan. Well, let's transition into talking about all of the champions. Being a champion in a given sport has gone a long way to cement these CPU Mii's legacies in internet culture, with memories from people who faced them automatically giving them reputations that cause them to be feared. And Anna is also a part of that group, so surely the champions have to be good, right? Well, they do range from pretty good to not that. However, none of the champions even rank in the top 10 in overall percentile. So how did that happen? Well, let's go from best to worst to find out. Starting with the lowest ranked champion in all of Wii Sports, we have the champion of tennis herself, Elisa, who ranks all the way down to number 73, with an average percentile of 42.597. But how? On top of her being the strongest in tennis, she's ranked number 2 in boxing. Even with her last place in baseball, she still has a percentile of 65.79 in OG, good for 16 in the cast. So let's look at Resort. And yeah, it's ugly. 0 top half rankings despite playing all 4 sports, with her best Resort ranking being number 59 in cycling, number 73 in swordplay, number 76 in table tennis, and topped off with being number 91 in basketball. This gives her a pitiful percentile of 25.203 in Resort, the 5th worst out of the entire cast. Oh boy, this may shock and or upset a lot of people. The next worst champion at number 63 overall is the 2-time champion, meme legend himself, Matt, who has a percentile of 45.829. Unfortunately, that's all he is, a meme legend. Let me go on a brief TED talk about why Matt Woohoo is a fraud. Yes, he is indeed a champion in 2 sports, nothing short of impressive. Now let's get Matt stands how he does in any other sport. He ranks at just above average number 49 in table tennis. After that one okay ranking, our meme legend completely falls off from here. Number 71 in basketball, number 74 in cycling, number 55 in tennis, being one of the previously mentioned starter opponents for that sport, and number 56 in baseball. He doesn't even have one game where he's particularly strong either. He ranks number 38 overall in OG with a percentile of 38.417, which is including his boxing championship, mind you. Resort is better, but still nowhere near where a GOAT should be ranked. In Resort, Matt ranks number 48 overall with a percentile of 51.388. Wow, he went from bad to ever so slightly above average. That's our GOAT, everybody. Matt is a legend in many ways, and I'm not going to diss him for the following he has in internet meme culture, but a Wii Sports GOAT he is definitely not. Matt should be flipping burgers. Next up is the table tennis champ Lucia, who ranks number 50 overall with an overall percentile of 50.7 flat. She made a pretty good run at the champion mid-title, but with her rankings being a bit more spread out rather than consistently hovering closer to the average. She does have 2 top 10s in Resort, with her previously mentioned championship in table tennis and is number 9 in cycling. However, she ranks pretty poorly everywhere else, being number 39 in baseball, number 69 in basketball, number 70 in swordplay, and worst of all, number 51 in tennis. Despite how I've talked about her, to give credit where credit is due, which she had a pretty decent rise from OG to Resort, going from number 51 in OG with a percentile of 25.42 all the way to number 16 in Resort, with a percentile of 63.34. With those 3 out of the way though, the rest of the champions do rank pretty well, if not what you'd think for them being the best in at least one sport. Next up is cycling champion Anna, who for as little fanfare as I feel she gets in comparison to the other champions, she is quietly mostly solid, being ranked number 25 overall with a percentile of 58.023. The big thing helping her besides her cycling championship is also being ranked number 2 in swordplay and having top half rankings in baseball and boxing. Also helping is her bad rankings for the most part being bad, but not abysmal. What prevents her from going higher on this list though is the one exception to that rule, being her ranking of number 99 in basketball. Next, let's talk about the only champion that debuted in Resort, the champion of basketball, Tommy, who ranks number 19 overall with an average percentile of 62.218, which ranks him at number 18 overall in Resort. As someone who debuted in Resort, there is not much to talk about with Tommy outside of his basketball championship. He has solidly above average rankings in swordplay and table tennis, being numbers 32 and 39 in those sports respectively, but is stopped from going any higher due to his number 80 ranking in cycling. Had he just been average in cycling, Tommy would be top 10 all time, but when you get this high on the list, and especially with Tommy's smaller sample size, just one misstep can cost you big time. Moving up one spot for our next champ at number 18 is Sakura, the champion of baseball, who has an average percentile of 62.243. Outside of baseball, having another top half ranking in tennis at number 24 was good enough to land Sakura a percentile of 80.51 in OG, 7th overall. So as you probably guessed at this point, a lackluster Resort is what drops her to this point all time. Unlike earlier cases though, Sakura's performance is more so average in Resort, as opposed to a massive fall off from OG. Her best overall ranking in Resort is number 34 in cycling, along with rankings of number 37 in swordplay, number 57 in table tennis, and number 61 in basketball. So while she's not amazing at anything in Resort, she's not super bad at anything either, leading to her being ranked number 47 in Resort with a percentile of 53.11. But again, when we're talking about the stats of being an all-time great, being average is not going to cut it. But with all of that being said, the best champion in all of Wii Sports is actually a co-champion. And the weaker co-champion at that. That's right, the best champion in Wii Sports is Sarah, who ranks number 14 overall, with an average percentile of 64.883. Outside of her number 2 ranking in tennis, Sarah largely ends up this high because she is really good in OG, with her other 2 sports resulting in rankings of number 14 in baseball and number 6 in boxing. She ranks second best in OG behind Maria, with a percentile of 87.707. However, again, she falls off in Resort. Her rankings for Resort don't have any standouts good or bad, but they trend slightly below average. Number 30 in basketball, number 42 in cycling, number 64 in table tennis, and number 66 in swordplay. Sarah's Resort rankings take up her 4 weakest sports overall, leaving her with an overall ranking of number 58 in Resort and a percentile of 47.765. So overall, I think that something we've learned through these rankings is that above all else, consistency is key for getting up this high. For the dominance the champions displayed in certain sports, they always had at least one significant weak point that held them back from even breaking into the top 10 all time. But if even these Miis aren't on that list, then who actually is? Well, let's get to it. Scraping their way into the list at number 10 overall is Saburo, with an average percentile of 67.363. Saburo is like many of the high rankers that came before him on this list from OG. He's this high largely based on his strong performances in OG Wii Sports. His best sport is his number 7 ranking in tennis, but he also ranks number 7 in boxing and number 15 in baseball. This makes for a percentile of 83.437, ranking 5th overall in OG. But again, Resort claims another victim, as Saburo falls down quite a bit in this game. None of his performances in Resort are quite as good as even his weakest sport in OG, with his best Resort ranking being number 29 in cycling. Combine that with rankings of number 41 in basketball, number 45 in swordplay, and number 66 in table tennis, and overall, Saburo falls from elite to only above average in Resort, ranking number 40 with a percentile of 55.158. Credit where credit is due, as Saburo doesn't have any truly abysmal rankings, which is even something that me ranked above him can't say. Moving up to number 9, we have Shaban, debuting in Resort with a percentile of 68.835. Shaban's here based on her major standout ranking of being number 4 in table tennis. She also maintains a strong position through avoiding a truly bad ranking, with her only bottom half ranking being her number 60 ranking in swordplay. Combine that with rankings of number 21 in cycling and number 42 in basketball, and we have a Mii who, from what we've seen, is a truly great Mii athlete, but you maybe can't help but think of the hypothetical of what would happen when we saw a larger sample size, and whether it affects Siobhan's ranking in a good or bad way. At number 8 is Helen, with an average percentile of 70.575. The highlights for Helen are her rankings of number 5 in baseball and number 6 in table tennis. Further improving her position on this list is her only having one bottom half ranking, being number 61 in swordplay, so it's not even a super bad low ranking on top of that. When it comes to the individual games, Helen ranks pretty good in both games, not just one or the other. Helen ranks 4th overall in OG with a percentile of 83.9, and is still a very solid 15th in Resort, with a percentile of 63.913. Helen is an all-time Wii athlete, and a sure Hall of Famer. There just so happens to be 7 other Miis that are even greater athletes than her. Speaking of which, at number 7 is Nelly, another debutant in Resort, who has a percentile of 71.103, which ranks her at 8th in that game. The crazy thing about Nelly's ranking being this high is that this is despite a number 71 ranking in cycling, and since she debuted in Resort, she only has 3 other sports to make that difference up, which she accomplishes and then some. Nelly ranks in the top quarter in every other sport, being number 24 in basketball, number 14 in swordplay, and number 8 in table tennis. This is another case in which Nelly is just slightly above average in cycling. She may very well have a mention in the overall GOAT discussion, but one misstep cost her and left her at number 7. Now at number 6, we have Theo, who has an average percentile of 71.99. Theo is here largely for being mostly at least great in any given sport. He ranks top 10 in 2 sports and top 15 in 4, and falls one spot short of having a 5th top 15 ranking. He's number 8 in tennis and boxing, and neither of those are even his best ranking, as statistics wise, his best sport is table tennis, where he's ranked number 12 due to the increased competition. The big thing holding Theo back is his number 68 ranking in swordplay, along with him also being just above average in cycling, being ranked number 48. Theo is much like Helen, where he's very good in both games. He ranks 6th overall in OG with a percentile of 81.433, but ends up above Helen overall by being better than her in Resort, ranking number 14 overall with a percentile of 64.908. Moving into the top 5, number 5 is Soda, who debuted in Resort with an average percentile of 72.663, ranking him at 6th overall in Resort. Unlike everyone below him, Soda has no below average rankings, with his worst sport being basketball, where he ranks number 36. However, he's also without a top 10 ranking, with his best sport being cycling, where he ranks number 14. Combine that with his other 2 sports ranking him in the 30s overall, and he's consistently very good at sports, but doesn't have a standout to put him any higher. Though the 6 Miis I just talked about are all no doubt all-time greats when it comes to Wii Sports, there's levels to greatness. Just because you're a legend doesn't necessarily mean you belong in the GOAT discussion. I believe that the Wii Sports GOAT discussion is reserved for these next 4 Miis. The Mount Rushmore of Wii Sports greatness, if you will. Those 4 Miis are Abe, Eva, Patrick, and Pierre. It's at this point that I don't think we can merely use their average percentiles to determine who the GOAT is. So let's go over all of these 4 Mii's merits that land them in this discussion, and some problems that naysayers may use against them. Starting with Patrick, the obvious big thing for him is that he's the Mii with the highest average percentile overall, at a staggering 79.243, a more than 2-point gap between him and 2nd overall. Patrick has this distinction despite having no top 10 rankings in any of the sports he participates in, though he comes very close, with his best sport being cycling, where he ranks number 11, along with having 2 other top 20 rankings, with a number 19 in basketball and number 20 in swordplay. His worst ranking is number 36 in table tennis, the best worst ranking of anyone in this discussion. But there are a few things going against him. Firstly, as mentioned earlier, he doesn't have a top 10 ranking in any sport. He's the only one of the big 4 with this distinction. There's also the fact that he only plays 4 sports, which when it comes to having a discussion between him and Pierre or Eva in an all-time list, could be a point that seriously hurts his case. Another thing is that despite him having the highest overall average percentile, when it comes to just comparing these 4 Miis in Resort, which is his entire sample size, his percentile is actually worse than Pierre's. So while Patrick's consistency has done well to get him this high, His smaller sample size and being worse than one of his GOAT competitors, even when reducing the data to that sample size, could be talking points that keep him from winning that debate. Next up, let's talk about Abe. Abe is sort of in a similar boat to Patrick. He has a lower percentile than Patrick, having to settle for second overall, but unlike Patrick, he does have a top 10 to his name, being number 6 in basketball. So people who value a standout ranking could be inclined to use that as a talking point in Abe's favor over at least Patrick. Also, like Patrick, Abe doesn't have a single bomb half ranking, which is something that both Pierre and Eva cannot say. But with having the same positives as Patrick as a fellow Mii that debuted in Resort, he carries the same negatives as well. On top of being less dominant on average than Patrick, Abe is also ranked worse than Pierre overall in Resort, and also suffers from only playing 4 sports. At first glance, I thought Abe was a somewhat distant number 4 in this conversation, as it felt like any positive he had, there was someone else in the discussion who could do it better. But looking deeper, there is value in having verifiable advantages over everyone else. But the big thing stopping Abe is the fact that he, as a Resort newcomer, may be overshadowed by fellow newbie Patrick, regardless of what Abe may have over him. Now we move on to Pierre. Despite having 7 sports, compared to Abe and Patrick's 4, therefore opening up more room for an outlier to draw him down, Pierre remains on the heels of Abe in terms of average percentile, though of course still a good bit behind Patrick. Let's talk about something pretty big for Pierre. He has more top 10 rankings than Abe and Patrick have sports they participated in, with 5 of them. However, what might be slightly disappointing about that fact is that none of those top 10s go any higher than his number 7 in cycling. What I think is truly impressive about Pierre's resume is that he already started off very good in OG, being number 8 overall, with a percentile of 73.463. As you've seen throughout this video, many of the elite in OG experience a fall off in form from then to Resort. Pierre is an exception, as he managed to not only stay on an elite level, he even improved it. Other than domination of James in Resort, Pierre is the best Mii in that game, even ahead of Patrick and Abe, despite a bomb half ranking of number 59 in table tennis, thanks to your R3 sports being top 10 rankings from him. So with how much I've just praised Pierre, why not just crown him GOAT right now? Well, that bomb half ranking is still a fairly big negative to his case, along with having another ranking that's just barely above average, with his number 27 ranking in tennis. He just doesn't have the same consistency as Patrick and Abe, though you could argue it naturally comes with a bigger sample size to pick apart, which as said before, serves to make Pierre's numbers even more impressive. He is also ranked below Eva in OG, and it's not particularly close. So while Pierre naturally has a lot of points above his competition from his large sample size, he does have some concerns that could cause people who especially value those points, such as consistency, to knock him down below people who may have a smaller sample size, but haven't shown signs of slippage like Pierre has. Lastly, let's talk about Eva. I think the biggest point in Eva's favor is the level of her dominance. At her peak, the only person I can see challenging Eva is James in Resort. That's how threatening she can be. You know how Pierre has 0 top 5s despite 5 top 10 rankings? Eva has 3 top 5 rankings to her name, being number 5 in both tennis and boxing, highlighted by being number 2 in basketball. She ranks number 3 overall in OG with a percentile of 84.06, over 10 points higher than Pierre's percentile in that game. So how does she have the lowest average percentile of anyone in this discussion? Well, the big point that goes against Eva is her being considerably lesser in Resort than any of her GOAT competition. Now, Eva is still very, very good in Resort, but with all her competition for this title being in the top 5 in Resort, being down at number 13 with an average percentile over 11 points behind the next closest competition is a noticeable difference. This is largely due to what to some may be a knock on Eva that would immediately disqualify her from GOAT status. She's ranked number 93 in table tennis. That is a far cry from even Pierre's worst ranking, let alone Patrick and Abe, whose worst rankings still approach pro status for their respective sports. Eva's second worst sport is baseball, where she's still in the top third, ranked number 19. If Eva were just average in table tennis, she would have a nearly unbreakable GOAT case that even if people didn't agree with it, would still understand how one would come to that conclusion. But this one sole ranking brings forth so many negatives to her GOAT argument. It makes her worst of the 4 by a mile in not just Resort, but also considerably behind an average percentile overall. Shows she's the least consistent of the 4, and pretty much leaves Eva's GOAT case to her high ceiling, rather than being able to allow accolades to do as much of the talking. But with all the GOAT cases presented here, who is the GOAT of Wii Sports? I looked through all the data, and through multiple different ways of perceiving how great one is, came to a file ranking. For as great as they are, I think even Abe are a fairly clear 3 and 4 for me. I don't know which one I'd put ahead of the other though, they're that close to me. Eva's drawbacks are just too much to ignore, and Abe doesn't really have enough to me that separates him from his competition that he can clearly claim as a point in his favor in the GOAT debate. So it comes down to Pierre and Patrick. Pierre, the OG who had a strong start, and not only managed to keep up that level, but improve in the face of new fresh competition, and even surpass some of the new faces challenging for GOAT status in some ways, but has shown some signs of relative weakness throughout his long, busy career. Paying that up against Patrick, who while not having the same body of work as Pierre in his Wii Sports career, has come in against more experienced veterans and shined when it comes to consistency. Truly something unique for someone who came into the Wii Sports field later than the OGs who couldn't keep up. Even without a top 10 ranking, Patrick is statistically on average the greatest Mii athlete. However, without even being able to match up to Pierre on average in the sports they both played together, are those points enough to pull him over Pierre? So now, the moment you've all been waiting for has arrived. In my personal opinion, Pierre is the GOAT of Wii Sports. Despite his slight signs of concern and a couple of subpar placements for his standards, I just couldn't overlook Pierre's longevity and even improvement with time, and being able to even beat the newer GOAT contenders in direct competition. But I think that's sort of the beauty of the GOAT debate. Any given person can look at the discussion from a different perspective. While I value Pierre's large sample size and continued ability to not only stay at the top, but level himself up, maybe someone values Patrick's rare consistency and statistical average superiority more. Maybe someone values Eva's dominance at her ceiling. Maybe someone values Abe's higher ceiling compared to Patrick, along with having the consistency. Maybe it's a mix of factors. Maybe someone even values the legacy and impact that one has outside of the world of Wii Sports, like Matt's meme status. Though let's be clear, I think anyone using that criteria is wrong. The point I'm trying to make is, anyone who is great enough to even be in any sports given GOAT debate is worthy of serious praise and respect. Thanks for watching.